Welcome to our Maternal Health Book Club. We are going to be talking about Michelle Lee's Working the Roots. If you have not taken the poll, please do so. And also put in the chat your name and any remedies that you might use. So for those just joining us, we are now doing the poll, which is only 3 questions, and then putting in the chat your name and any herbal remedies that you use or you used growing up.
It can just be like a quick lunch.
Hi, Janae. We are doing the poll and putting in the chat your name and any herbal remedies, traditional medicines that you use growing up or you use now.
Thank you, Tina. I'm about to look on here now.
All right, so I'm going to start, but please feel free to continue to use the chat. Today we're talking about Working the Roots by Michelle Lee. I have been wanting to read this book for years, and then it was a recommendation made to me by another doula in New Jersey. And I'm so glad she did because it is an awesome book. So if you are new here to our maternal health book clubs, we meet every Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month. to do the Maternal Health Book Club. And we talk about topics related to pregnancy and postpartum, but also related to general health. And you do not have to read the book to participate in the discussion because we ask general questions, although it's always recommended that you read the book either before or after the book club. But feel free to always come. We have great discussions about the topic. So tonight, and I do not want to be the only one talking, so please turn on your camera if you can, share, ask questions, or this is going to be a very long book club. So why was this book chosen? Well, I love this book because it talks about healing, but in a real and traditional sense, I guess. The description of the book is over 400 years of traditional African-American healing, discussed through firsthand interviews, conversations, recipes, and then there are, at the end, there is descriptions of recipes of each herb and its properties and how it's used. It's a wonderful book to start with. There are many books about herbs, medicine, traditional medicine that you can use in addition to this one. This one I liked because it also had the interviews and the real discussions and conversations with people who used these traditions, healings, and it also talks about it in terms of spiritual health as well. So we're going to talk about that. First, what did you think of the book? Those that have read it, did you enjoy it? Did you find it too long or too short? What were your thoughts?
I started reading it and I'm loving it so far. One of my favorite parts about the book is that the beginning section that goes through the narrative and the interviews is based a town over from where I grew up.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was really cool. She was mentioning different landmarks and I was like, oh, I know where that is. So that was really kind of surreal. And the other cool thing is things that my dad told me about when I was a kid, I started recognizing the names of them pop up in the book, the more common names that you wouldn't find really except from the people that use them in that area. So that was really interesting. I enjoyed that.
That's awesome. Yes, the majority of the book the interviews happens in North Carolina. There are some in Georgia, I believe, and maybe Virginia as well, but the majority are in this one area of North Carolina. Anyone else? Well, if you have not, I also sent out a link to the author discussing healing traditions, her book. It's kind of a long interview, but really great. I love to actually seek out the authors of books that I'm reading to find out about their other works, their passions, and see if I can hear it from them in interviews. So that was really great to see. All right, so this is the table of contents for the book. If you have not read it, it talks about reclaiming our natural healing tradition, strong medicine, spirit work, and then coming full circle. So those are kind of the areas. And then the second part is actually the recipes, talking about the different herbs, how they're used, and at the end, it talks about working the powers. So also using it in, I want to say a non-traditional sense, but it is traditional, but in ways from more than just body healing, but also spiritual healing and things that people might call like superstitions or other things. And we'll talk about that. So I want to start here. If you've read the book or not, why do you think that herbal remedies, traditional medicine, healing medicine was used in the Black community and in all communities, but particularly in the Black community in the US here, you know, in the 1800s, 1900s till today? Rashida?
Well, I just gotta admit that I did not receive my book yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. Being that the fact that this information is encapsulated in a way that can be passed down. But the reason why I think that we have traditionally used this is because of lack of access to medical care, and these things were growing around and easily accessible.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
I definitely agree
yeah, go
with
ahead.
her. Oh, sorry, Tina.
No, I was just going to reiterate. Yes, lack of access.
Yeah, I was gonna definitely say I think it was because these were the plants that were growing around us. This was the only medicine we knew at one point, before things began being created. We had herbs and plants and food and prayer to depend on. So yeah.
So at the very beginning of the book, there's a quote from Miss Sally McLeod, who I believe when this book was being written was 90 something. And she says, don't care how bitter it was or how sweet it was, you had to drink it. And they didn't carry us to no doctor neither. Didn't have no money to pay no doctor, right? So she talked about basically why they relied on traditional medicines, as both of you were saying, you could go outside and get, you could use at home, because they didn't have any money for doctors, and they also didn't have access to doctors. And I know some of us saw Bringing in the Spirit about midwifery in the US, and how you know, doctors did not want to treat Black women, Black men, and so they took care of their own communities with what access they had to herbs, tinctures, things like that. So if you haven't gotten the book yet, this is what it looks like. I don't know if I can, it's not going to come in clear, but each, so in each of these chapters, they're pretty long, and they have stories of different people, and all the people kind of connect. Like the author is related by marriage to Miss McLeod and her grandchildren, and so you'll see like kind of an arc of where of how she finds these people to interview. All of them are older, so older men and women in the community, and she talks with them. She goes out into the field with them. There's one section we're going to talk about where she actually goes out. So it's a wonderful book to also show you things that aren't said. So it's not all about the words written on the page, but also about the relationships, the respect that's shown to the elders, all kinds of stuff. I really enjoyed this book because it was nothing like a textbook. And it said a lot more than you imagine it's going to at the beginning, right? So for example, there's a section about a gentleman named Joe Hayes. And this is how his name is written in the book, Joe Hayes. Joe Hayes together with the H capitalized, okay? And she talks about how he is considered like a ladies' man, right? And his charisma, and she goes out with him to the fields, and his fields, and they talk. I think she said she didn't interview him, but for 4 years she went out and worked with him and talked with him about plants. And so at one point he says he has a belief that energy finds energy. So his wife died in childbirth, in their um, in their third birth, with their third child, and he spiraled after that, and kind of moved away from all of the things he loved. He had been a hunter. He loved hunting. He loved being in the fields. He loved all of those things, and he stopped. And he said, "Life killed my wife, and I will never kill life again. It was bound to happen because energy finds energy." So he felt like, because he had been a hunter, that there was a balance and that his wife had to die. What do you think about his story, and is it about his belief that energy finds energy?
I think it's a beautiful illustration of how people find meaning in grief and loss, and how that affects their beliefs moving forward.
Does this sound familiar to any of you? I know, for example, in my family, there's definitely a belief in karma, right? In energy and putting out there uh, what you want or what you need, and that the universe, the earth, will provide that, or God will provide that, depending on, who you're talking to in my family. So there's definitely kind of this energy transfer that is discussed in families, that I felt I resonated with that story. Not that he was responsible for his wife, but that there's a balance. And he was honoring that. And I know that there are a lot of Native American and indigenous traditions around balance, and also around respect for what you kill and use, and that, people dying is not something to be feared. So I thought this section was pretty profound, when it was talking about that. But a lot of what you will find in this book and throughout books about healing traditions, it talks about energy and how that energy is used. And as a student midwife and as a doula, I completely believe in energy at a birth, and in maintaining that energy, positive energy, and that it does help with birth and with all aspects of healing. So Joe Hayes, what got him out of kind of his depression after his wife died, he had a vision, and it led him to water, and he became what's called like a water witch. So somebody who could find water. And he did this for 32 years, okay? Where people would come to him, community members, and ask him to find water for them. And other people would try and they would fail. And then he would do it and he would find water, right? So he did this for 32 years, and then in 2001, the government required all water witches and well diggers to prove they were qualified. This meant passing a test filled with mathematical equations and questions on geology and hydrology. 32 years of experience invalidated by the stroke of a pen. One can still practice without a license, but those caught are fined heavily. Governments pass laws to contain people they fear and maintain control and power. But the traditions of a people and the gifts from their ancestors can never be contained or destroyed. Traditions are the life breath of the people. It is how we have survived. It is why we have survived. So that's at the end of Joe Hayes' story. What do you think of that, that paragraph there? Amber?
I think it's exactly like Janae was saying, similar to midwifery, where when it's something, especially within the African American and African and enslaved people, indigenous, all of these things, when we're able to do something that is not easily understood, they try to, one, find a way to like justify it with their practices or their sciences, and two, try to condemn it to things like witchcraft when it's really our own spiritual practices, traditions, spiritual gifts. And, you know, we see this all the time. And it's unfortunate.
And do you think that this this tradition will go away? That there won't be any people that can find water?
I don't think it will ever go away because it's something that's inside of us. You know, it's a spiritual thing, so it's something that's not going to leave, regardless of who or what tries to attack it and stop it or make us forget. It's going to always circle back some way, somehow, you know, and I think that's why a lot of us are on the path we're on today, because they couldn't make us forget about it. You know, they built these schools and they could put these tests in place, but you can't take away the spirit. And so, but you can't kill the spirit. So yeah, I definitely don't think they could put an end to it.
Yes, I completely agree. I think what happens is it goes underground. You know, as you were saying with midwifery, you cannot kill midwifery. You know, it has been tried. What happens is it goes underground, and just like they're saying, you can practice, but if they find you, you will be fined, or in the case of midwifery, you could be jailed, you know, for practicing without a license or whatever. But people are still going to do it because it's part of who they are. It's their soul, it's their passion. They're good at it. It's needed for the community. So it's going to continue to develop. And we know that through genetics, things are passed down through generations. And that includes these healing arts, these calls to different traditions. You know, and in the book, she talks about that and kind of what she received from her grandmother and from her great-great-grandmother and those things, and how that is part of your genetics as well. It's not just tradition passed down, it's also who you are, part of your cells and your cellular memory. And we're beginning to learn more and more about that through epigenetics, and what happens to your cells, and how that is carried through to your children and to your children's children. So it's amazing. So at one point they are searching for yellow root, and it is a long search. the author thinks that it's going to be easy. Not easy, but she does not anticipate it will be as hard as it is. And the two gentlemen, a father and a son, who are taking her to find this, they tease her because she doesn't have the right boots, because you need boots that go all the way up to your thighs, and hers aren't. And they tell her, like, not everybody not survives, but makes it, can continue on to find this yellow root. And they start going, and she realizes how hard it is. You know, there are bugs, snakes, bobcats, other things. It's marshy land. It's hard to find a path, all of these things, right? So she gets to it. And do you know what yellow root is?
Isn't it golden seal?
It's golden seal. And so golden seal is very expensive, right? And she's like, how can it be so expensive if people have it in their backyards? But then she has to go and get it. And then she realizes how hard it is, right, to get it. And the gentleman that's escorting her says, oh, go ahead and get some. And she goes to get some, and she only takes a few. But he says, basically, when people come and find it, they take all of it. And that's the problem, right? Is that they overuse this resource. Then they slap it into bottles and make a lot of money, and basically kill it off, right? So at the end of that chapter, she says, she says, I now know I understand nothing. I am an infant trying to learn how to speak. My part in the language is listening and feeling connection in my heart. Yellow root must be a strong medicine if this is what folks have to go through in order to get it. Have there been times in your life where you have felt like this, where you have thought something would be easy, or you knew something and then realized that you understood nothing, and you had to listen to the advice from your elders, or had to basically rethink what you thought you knew?
Absolutely. Most definitely. This passage right here, yeah, like what Amber said, it just, I had to take a picture of this because I'm going to have to read this over to myself sometimes, because it's so true, and it relates to my journey with midwifery. Like, in different words, I've said this to myself so many times. Like, I remember first started working with my preceptor, I'm like, man, I feel stupid around her, but I like that because I'm learning. You know, I thought I knew something. I thought it was going to be smooth. And when she said, this must be strong medicine, if this is what folks have to go through to get to it, that's how I feel with midwifery. Like, it must be something getting ready to change. Something is getting ready to happen if it's this hard for us to get in and do what we got to do. So, yeah, definitely.
Anyone else felt like this?
Every time I think I know something, I end up feeling like this when I know a little bit more.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, I have felt like this so many times, and mainly now that I'm older. There's so many things that my mother and my grandmother tried to tell me when I was younger that I just didn't have the context for. And now I'm like, now I understand I know nothing, right? Because, like, just thinking back to decisions I made and things I did and what they were trying to tell me about raising children or life or health, all these things. And I just really related when she said my part in the language is listening, right? And feeling connection in my heart. I think that is so profound. And yeah, So I really felt this, not only in regard to medicines and things like that, but a lot of things in your life, where I think you get to a point where you say, gosh, I realize now I know nothing about this, even though I might have studied it or, read about it or whatever for years, but I just really am at the beginning of this journey. So I felt like that was pretty profound in the book as well. And then she talks about her grandmother. And it was interesting because that's part of where they start talking about voodoo. They start talking about voodoo traditions, but also things that the outside world would probably call superstitions, right? Or folk medicine, herbal remedies, but not have very much faith in it. That is like the medicinal pharmaceutical world. And so some of them, I put some of them in here. There are a lot more in the book, but she said when you have, this should be worm. When you have ringworm, you put a penny in vinegar solution until it turns green, and then you rub it on the ringworm until it disappears. So I thought that was interesting. Also, she said that if babies had an earache, Mama would take a cigarette, even though she didn't smoke, and she would blow the smoke in the child's ear. Then she would syringe the ear with a little warm water. So I thought these were interesting. Are there traditions or things that your family did when you had kind of these ailments that would kind of go into this category of kind of herbal traditional medicine, superstitious kind of things that were done that, if you asked a doctor, they would say, oh, that's not going to work, but somehow kind of always did.
Well, it's not something that my family did as a tradition, but it's something that um, I did and it worked. The times that I did do it with my own daughter, when she would get an earache or an ear infection, I would just do some olive oil with some garlic and onion, let it simmer, and then extract the oil and pour a few drops in her ear, and then put a cotton ball over it and let her just lay for a little bit and do that on both sides. And it'll be gone within a few days. So that's what I did. And when I was younger, I don't know why, but and this is not anything herbal or anything. My mom used to give us ice cream when we got a ringworm. I'm not sure why.
I don't know. I wish I had gotten ice cream. I did not. But there were traditions. I did have onions on my feet to draw out cold and congestion. In my house, we used a lot of Vicks, and that was spread liberally all over everything. There was ginger ale for stomach ailments, definitely. I mean, it's so interesting to think about, but these things weren't, medicinally proven, but they were used in my house. If you got a stomach ache, you immediately got ginger ale. And if you had congestion, you leaned over a hot bowl with garlic. And and now that I know the wonderful health properties of garlic, onion, all of these things, it makes sense. But as a child, I'm like, why do I have onions on my feet? I don't understand. Jordan?
The things my dad would come back with were always exceptionally strange. Anytime we had a stomach ache, I don't know what it was, but he would go into the kitchen and start mixing things together. And usually it had some form of baking soda or something in it. And he'd give me this fizzing cup and he'd say, here, take a little bit for your stomach. And I would drink it. And sometimes I would throw up and other times it would just completely set on my stomach. But either way, at the end of that glass, there was relief. And like I said, I don't know what was in it. It was some concoction that he pulled together. And this is never something my parents did with us, but his parents, and this is a little bit gross, but it's in line with the thing that whenever they would get an ear infection, they would put a little bit of urine in their ear. And apparently that's an old folk remedy for clearing up ear infections. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to say it works.
Oh my, I don't know if
Yeah.
I'll be trying that one, but
But it's interesting.
but it's interesting because you don't know, and now we're finding out all of these things that do have, medicinal value and do lemons and, all the things that are naturally antibiotics. And so it's fascinating. But, a lot of us have these traditions that are passed down through the family. We don't know why we're using them, but it's our kind of our first defense, right? Before you would try a pharmaceutical, or at least in my family, that's how it always was. One of the people that she interviewed said, "My spiritual practice is part of my overall health. My mother's daily spiritual practice was modeled for me and taught me how to have a daily practice." So at this point in the book is when she starts talking about the kind of um, connection between the spiritual health and the physical health. And I want to talk about that for you. Is your spiritual health part of your overall health? And was that modeled for you as a child, or is that something that you learned, as an adult? Amber?
For me, my family is very spiritual. Actually, I went through this book with my mom and my grandmother, and we were just talking about the different remedies and how, they use them. Like my grandmother is a McLeod and from the same area. So it's just very like pertinent to us. But prayer goes with every medicine. So it made perfect sense to me for them to include it this way.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would definitely add, my spiritual practice is a part of my overall health. If I'm not where I need to be spiritually, it seems like everything is just thrown off. I'm just not doing well. And it wasn't modeled for me growing up. It wasn't. It's something that I adapted on my own. Gained my own relationship with my creator, and I'm blessed to be able to have that. But yeah, it wasn't modeled for me growing up.
Yeah, it wasn't modeled for me either. My mother um, came from a very white traditional family that was not spiritual or religious at all in any way, and did use herbal remedies and things passed down, um, but they didn't embrace the traditions of those, I guess I would say. Whereas on my dad's side, my grandmother, my great grandmother, definitely there were, and later on we'll talk about it. My great grandparents were hog farmers. And so some of the recipes in the back talk about using, like there's a gumbo in there using the whole hog head. And that was very much similar to the traditions in my family. You used all the parts of the animals that you used. Food was very much part of healing, and what you ate, especially when you were sick or going through things, you were offered food, and so I developed it as an adult because I wanted to pass that to my children, and I wanted them to have more grounding than I had had. And so they wouldn't have such a difficult 20s and they would have more an easier time of it, kind of finding their place. But I love how the spiritual is, you know, interwoven in this book with the food and the herbs and why you would use them for medicinal purposes as well. So we're going to watch a video here, just about one woman's kind of journey, just like we're talking about in using healing traditions. It's very short.
Water plays a significant role in so many different healing traditions. Growing up in the South, Black, the trauma of the ocean, not wanting to get your processed hair ruined by the water. There's like generations of Black folks that can't swim in a lot of places. I didn't have a relationship with water. And when I moved here, I was like, oh, I better develop some kind of relationship to the water. So I would even, just go sit by it, talk to it, do ceremony at the water. Never really felt comfortable getting my body in the water. But there was something about snorkeling and seeing the life in the world under there that was like, it made me forget my fear. I feel like part of what I'm trying to do with my life is ancestral healing. And how can I recover what's been lost? My brother could swim, and I was like, I remember dropping him off at the YMCA for his swim lessons, and I was like so excited that one of us could swim. He was just like, yeah, I swim. He would come out wet from the pool, and I was like, what is this like? It's like carefree Blackness. It's amazing. And I was like, okay, we're not just gonna, it doesn't just end. It doesn't just end. Like it's recoverable. Yeah, it's recoverable. I think Black folks healing from trauma is one of the most important things in the world right now. I've been trying to answer this question of how do we heal on the scale that we need to heal on? We have to go back in time and recover things that our ancestors knew about. I think the first question is, how do I bring my light as much forward as possible?
All right. So what did you think of that video? It was very small, but I thought very powerful. So why do you think we would talk about trauma and healing in this, along with this book?
You said, why would we think about trauma and healing along with this book?
Mhm.
I guess I would say trauma because, African Americans endured a lot of a lot of pain and tribulation, and a lot of things that, you know, we grew up doing, we enjoyed doing, was cultural practices for us, was spiritual practices for us. It was taken away from us, as if we were doing something wrong. And just being able to have a book like this and having access to these remedies and these powerful words and practices that's being passed down, that's a blessing. And so when we talk about herbal healing and we talk about, um, you know, remedies and cultural practices and things like that, you know, I think trauma will always come up in that, because, you know, we've been doing those things beforehand, but during slavery, we had to rely on those things in order to survive. And so I think it'll always come up. And like I said, a lot of these things have been stolen from us, like in the book when they were talking about how, okay, now he has to go through testing to do something that he's been doing for 30 something years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not fair when you think about it. That's traumatic, you know, and then you do it anyway because it's just in you, and you get locked up. Or you do it, you get paid $2 for it. Somebody else do it, they get paid 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you the one who started it. So yeah, that's my opinion on it.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else with thoughts on how this woman's journey connects to kind of what we're talking about?
I thought we was talking about the book, not the
Well,
lady.
both, yeah. You know, because I showed it because of what we're learning in the book, right? So part of it is I thought it was a nice little encapsulation kind of what we're talking about. She moved to Hawaii and does not swim and has no connection to the water. And so she, like we were talking about, decided to change that for herself and felt like that she had been dealt a disservice by not being able to swim, which traditionally a lot of, you know, Black people don't swim. And she said, you know, like when she would pick her brother up, it was like, wow, you know, like he's living this free kind of Black existence that is unfamiliar to me. But as you were saying, was familiar to our ancestors, right? That was taken away. That connection to the water, the connection to swimming and understanding, you know, the life of the water. And, you know, in some ways, learning these herbal remedies, learning these traditions is giving back something that we knew, that we had, that we practiced, and is, I think, a part of us genetically passed down from our ancestors. So I felt like, you know, that kind of encapsulated that. As you said, trauma is a part of this discussion. I think a significant part of the discussion. I mean, the very first quote, you know, was about how, you know, we couldn't go to the doctor, we couldn't afford it, but also we didn't have access to it. And that is trauma, you know. When we saw bringing in, you know, the spirit, you know, people died because they could not, you know, because they had a breech birth or because they could not access, you know, a surgeon. You know, no matter how much the midwives did, there are going to be some people that are not going to survive. And, you know, but the trauma of that and of all the things that happened is carried, you know, through generation in our bodies, in our decision making, and our, you know, all kinds of things. So I thought that was really interesting. And that's a whole series of videos if you are interested, about healing traditions and Hawaii and this woman's journey. So, okay, let me find where I was. Okay, so chapter 5 of the book is about preventative health care. And so it starts listing some of the things that are used and why they're used and how they're used. So we have, I just got on a page. So we have things like apple cider vinegar, castor oil, bentonite clay, cod liver oil, Epsom salt, lemon, pot liquor or liquor, which is the broth left after you cook collard greens, which I didn't realize had a name, but is the best part for me. Sagebush and other things. Are these familiar to you?
Yeah, some of these are familiar to me. Definitely lemon. I use lemon for so many things. Amber said pot liquor. I didn't know it had a name either, Tina.
Yeah. But apparently it does. I just, it's the good part, man. Like, it's the juice.
Wow. But yeah, lemon, definitely the magnesium, the Epsom salts, the bentonite clays, castor oil, and apple cider vinegar. Yeah, but I've never really dug deep into. I mean, I've used sage to cook, but I've never really dug deep into the sage bush or the cod liver oil. Definitely had me some collard green juice though. So
Yes, I didn't even know, I didn't do it for medicinal or health practices, but just because it's good, But apple cider vinegar, I swear is used for everything. And basically people are like, just drink it like a shot, use it in your hair, everything. Okay. And I cannot stand the smell, but I have used it in my hair. That was a mistake, because then you carry that smell, for a while. I have taken it as a shot, because it's supposed to do all kinds of things health wise. Castor oil, we have, as a student midwife, we have moms all the time asking, should I use castor oil, especially when they're 41 weeks gestation. And my preceptor is like, no, don't do that. Okay. Because the problem with castor oil, and she said it in the book too, is that once you use it, you can't turn that around. So once you use it, you are committed, and you are going to be having a baby, or you're going to be going to the hospital because the baby's not going to handle the contractions very well. So it's not like one of those things that, if you see that the baby is in distress, you can back off of it. You're full go, okay? Because that castor oil, you will be pooping, and it causes contractions in your intestines and anus that then trigger contractions, right, in your uterus. And that's going to happen. So you better be prepared if you use castor oil for all that's to come. Okay. And so in the book, she says, once you use it, that it's going to work. I mean, one way or the other, it's going to work, and it might not be pretty, right? So talked about cod liver oil and the amazing benefits of cod liver oil, which I had never known. So I would highly encourage you to read that chapter in the book, Yellow Root, Soak or Salve, which we talked about, baking soda, which I think Jordan mentioned. So there's so much in here. As Amber did, I would highly suggest, you share it with women in your family. You look through it, you figure out how it would fit in with your lifestyles and traditions. Remember that we are not recommending any specific treatments for anything, right? If you have a condition, you should see your doctor or midwife or discuss it with them. But these are traditional salves, ointments, things that were used throughout centuries. And Epsom salt, magnesium, most people are deficient in magnesium. I would highly encourage people to take Epsom salt baths or soak your feet. There is magnesium lotion, there is all kind magnesium that you can take. Magnesium is going to help you poop with constipation. It's also going to relax your muscles, so it helps if you have aches and pains, but also if you are having like Charlie horses and those kind of things. Lemon as well. Lemon is antibacterial. Magnesium spray too, yes. Lemon is antibacterial, and it can be used for so many things. I use it for my boys' teenagers' shoes and the nastiness growing inside of that. But you can use it for cleaning, for all kinds of stuff. So the clay, the bentonite clay, you can make your own deodorant. I have with the bentonite clay as well as the lemon. After a few days, your body will sweat out the toxins, and then you can just use the bentonite clay in terms of deodorant with baking soda. So, there's a lot of remedies, things, even beauty, topical kind of things that we use that you can replace some of these things with that are more natural and healthy for your body. So in chapter 6, they talk about the different ways that it's prepared. Hold on. I am losing battery. So we have teas. So we have hot infusions and cold infusions. There are decoctions, syrups, powders, tinctures for ingestion. A tincture is nice. We use a lot of tinctures in my midwifery practice because tinctures don't have to go through you can put under your tongue and it can go right into your system, and they don't have to go through the digestive system, right? So because once things if you're taking a pill or anything, once it goes into your digestive system, there's a lot of acid and a lot of things are broken down. So a tincture can be your best bet in terms of getting it into your client's system or into your friend or your child, whoever. We also have external preparations, baths, like we were saying with the Epsom salt baths. Herbs can be added, compresses, creams, lotions, gargles, mouthwashes, poultices, salves, and ointments. And there are examples of them in all throughout the second part of the book, and it does it by also ailment. So, for example, allergies, anemia, arthritis, there are different remedies. So anemia, which is one that I suffer with, and a lot of women, pregnant women I know as well. It says eating beets and their tops and drinking beet broth boosted and cleansed the blood. Beets were boiled or baked. Boiled beet broth, which contained many nutrients, was drunk. Okay, so boiling beets, drinking it, and it's so funny because my grandmother always had beets. She always had eggs, hard-boiled eggs in beet juice. So there were always these pink or red eggs in her refrigerator. And as a child, I was so disgusted by this. Like, I would never eat that. And now I'm like, it makes total sense to me, right? And again, as you grow up and you begin to learn things, eggs are some of the most nutrient dense things that you can eat, and beets, and putting them together makes sense, right? And especially if you have anemia, if you're pregnant, all of these things. But I didn't know that as a child. And so at pickled beets, yeah, for high blood pressure, all the things. So, things we know now as a child, we might not have understood. But there's lots of different suggestions in the book for how to use these compresses, creams, teas, all kinds of stuff. In chapter 7, they talk about the medicine. Okay, so let me see if I can find an example. So, for example, in the book, in the narrative part, they talked about buttonbush, a weed that was used, and one of the people that was interviewed said, "Oh yeah, if we had a cold, my mom would just say, go get some buttonbush, and then would make a tea out of it." And buttonbush is also known as honey bells. I don't know what buttonbush is, but there's a picture of it here, and it's a common weed. And they would get this weed, and a tea was made from the leaves or root to treat colds, coughs, and diarrhea, to reduce infections, to break fevers, and to treat colic and stomach aches. Buttonweed leaves and root are also used in Ayurvedic. I don't know how to say that. I do, but it's not coming out right. And Chinese medicine. Okay. So again, one of these things that was used commonly, that is common throughout people's yards, was used for medicinal purposes. So in this section, you're going to see the root, herb, mineral, food, animal, and each entry details the botanical name, the properties, the medicinal properties, the health benefits, and then how you prepare it and apply it. So, you're going to see some common ones like castor oil, and, that's a laxative, a detoxifier, and immune booster. And, it's going to give you an idea and a picture of what it looks like. Now, chapter 7, as I was saying, was really interesting for me. I didn't expect it, even though in the book, she had talked about her tradition of, of medicine that was not just for medicinal purposes, but also for spiritual purposes. Yes, but at this back one, she talks about getting a spell off of someone. Sorry, had a little technical difficulty there. Thank you for sticking around. But this last session is really like hoodoo remedies is what it's called, working the powers, conjuring and hoodoo remedies. So I thought that was really interesting and wanted to get your thoughts on any hoodoo remedies that you are familiar with from your family or traditions that you used as a child. And I know that there are some that you might use and not even really think about. So for example, like if I spill salt, I
You're breaking up, Tina.
oh, can you hear me?
Now, yeah.
Okay, so what traditions are you familiar with that would kind of fall in under the hoodoo remedy kind of area? Amber?
So my family is very hoodoo, but they don't claim it because they're also Christians. So they're like, no, we don't claim it. But it's like, no, y'all are. So when my mom was younger, like if they were starting to get a cold, they would have like they would put like a little herbal bag around their neck and have to wear it to school. Also things growing up like sweeping with salt and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Yeah, we do all that.
Yes, and you know, things like not splitting the pole, throwing salt over your shoulder, you know, not putting a bag on the floor. Just random things that are so you know, that are traditional, you know, in my family. Like you know, my grandmother would be like, no, we don't do that, you know, or yeah, or we do this if a cold is starting to happen or if you are pregnant. So in the book it talks about, she talks about being pregnant and she was putting out clothes, putting clothes on the line, and her mother was like, no, you can't do that because you lift your arms up over your head when you are you know, you can't lift your arms up over your head when you're pregnant. She's like, what are you talking about? And it's because there's a belief that that the baby's cord will get entangled around the neck if you're lifting your arms up. And you know, just all these fascinating things, dreaming of fish. Yes, you know, and it's so funny, I can't even remember all of them because they're just like part of, you know, oh, like, you know, New Year's we have to eat um ham, uh collard greens and black eyed peas. You have to, like, it's not even a, like, you would set yourself up for a horrible year if you did not. Like, this is how you know, you believe in my family. Jordan?
My family does the same thing at New Year's, and my granny has a couple of weird ones that she like, you cannot wash clothes on Sunday in my granny's house because God will blow your washing machine up.
Oh my,
Same thing for going fishing. You can't go fishing on a Sunday because you'll catch the devil.
oh, okay. Okay. Mhm. Yes. You know, it's just so interesting. And I know these were protective things that were done, you know, for people, and probably at the start had, there were protective reasons for it, you know. So I wanted to show you another video um, that talks about the connection between uh, trauma and our traditions that we grew up with. Let me see.
the less you pee. Those are the words of the noted psychologist and expert in trauma, Mercedes Mann, my grandmother. That was my first lesson in Black folk mental health. In layman's terms, stop all that damn crying. In more clinical terms, it's a passed down coping mechanism used to teach the internalization of trauma to maintain survival. It's giving very much, this is what I learned, so this is what I'm going to teach you. I am a Black therapist with a Black therapist, and I find human behavior fascinating. I've been in the field for 16 years, and I have a private practice where I work with majority Black women. In my observation, Black people are dope. Despite stolen lands and stolen bodies and stolen culture, despite laws and psychology and science skewed and used with white supremacy in order to justify the inhumane treatment, Black people have mastered survival, surviving and living and loving and worshiping and being so damn beautiful. But I wonder how? What protective factors are at play? So I have a theory. Ride out with me on this one. Trauma responses. In order to maintain survival, Black people have integrated trauma responses into the culture. So much so that we hand it down from generation to generation under the guise of values and traditions. Let's get into it. Let's talk science. Trauma responses are a physiological reaction in response to a perceived harmful event, a threat, or a threat to survival. A necessary system, it was wired into the human nervous system in order to keep us safe. So if there was a bear in the wild, this system would kick in to maintain survival. While it's necessary, it was never intended to be a long-term solution. The body is not meant to stay in that state of arousal. It's supposed to be short-term. Keep that in mind. All right, boom, let's talk American history. During the transatlantic slave trade, Europeans built the foundation of this country on the raping, pillaging, enslaving, dehumanizing of Africans. They used mental, physical, and spiritual warfare in order to integrate white supremacy into the violence. They skewed psychology, religion, and science, all to justify this treatment. For example, drapetomania, which is when enslaved Africans would attempt to run away, was once a mental health diagnosis. So with all that said, traumatizing Black bodies is as American as the strange fruit in apple pie. When a community is traumatized over and over, it causes a collective trauma experience. So when we put the science and the history together, white supremacy is the bear. White supremacy is the bear. But let's take it a step further. When I started, I said, the more you cry, the less you pee as a clinical intervention. Due to the Black trauma experience my grandmother had learned and subsequently was teaching, the internalization of emotions is a safety concern. To externalize emotions does not maintain survival. Now, I didn't know when she was telling me this, if this was about the fact that I used the bathroom so much or the fact that I was so emotional. Either way, it was a deliberate attempt to stop the mind-body connection. Survival mode. Black people live our entire lives in survival mode. I'm gonna let that sink in. Black people, there is trauma in your traditions. Now, what does this look like? It looks like everyday lessons we learn, some verbal and nonverbal, that are given to us with the intent of maintaining survival. So for example, respectability politics, trauma response. When we grow up, we learn we have to work 10 times harder than everybody else. Make sure you get to work on time. You know them white folks watching you. Don't get in here and embarrass me in front of these white people. Whatever you do, please don't give them a reason to call the police. The rigorous internal and external self-awareness rooted in anti-Blackness is traumatizing to the system. It is exhausting. Maintain survival mode. Code switching, trauma response. Yo, so the way I talk to the people I know and other Black people, like, yes, girl, you better do it and do it well. It's substantially different than the way I talk in the workplace. Good morning, Megan. How you doing? You're awesome. Code switching is a means of survival. It literally means getting and keeping the job. And code switching is not just a change in language, it's a change in tone, intonation, volume, pitch, and the way I carry myself. It is exhausting. Maintain survival mode. The strong Black woman trope, trauma response. So I was in session with a beautiful Black human, and they said to me, well, I hold the weight, but I hold it well. And I said to them, well, what would happen if you didn't hold the weight? She was talking about stress. What would happen if you put it down? And we both looked out the window together because Black women rarely learn ourselves outside of stress, outside of trauma. It's as if every lesson that we get is supposed to teach us to be strong. The more you cry, the less you pee. Stop all that crying. Be strong. Your job is supposed to be stressful. Makes you strong. People are supposed to have access to your body. Makes you strong. Love is supposed to hurt. Makes you strong. You're supposed to strap the world on your back. Makes you strong. I've had Black women come into my office and spout off trauma like grocery lists, always maintaining composure, never leaving survival mode. My name is Jalan Agnew, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. When I go to various trainings and workshops, this is how I introduce myself. It might sound normal, however, I am having a trauma response. It's a mix of respectability politics, code switching, and the strong Black woman trope. I, through the lessons that I've learned that I have to show myself in a different way. Because I have distant memories of daily microaggressions. And oh my God, are you the new staff? What do you work in the kitchen? And being overlooked for a position. And oh my God, Jellen, I thought you were the other African-American woman. I'm so sorry. And crying and being called aggressive. Giving validation to my grandmother's wise words. And like I said earlier, trauma responses are not intended to be long-term. When you are in a constant state of survival, your body cannot regenerate and rest, leaving more room for illness, mental, physical, and spiritual illness. Black people, there is trauma in your traditions and illness in your trauma. Now, when I started this, I said I believe that healing Black people is what I'm on earth for. And I think it's time for a mindset shift from surviving to thriving. Because we are in survival mode so much that rest makes us uncomfortable. So I suggest resting by any means necessary, realizing that internal peace is a revolutionary act, valuing health over hustle, and making sure that we're doing all these things to keep ourselves alive, because I can go on and on about the trauma responses. Hustle, trauma response. Colorism, trauma response. Putting cancer-causing chemicals in our hair that causes cancer, trauma response. Our addiction to unhealthy foods, trauma response. Our aversion to traditional and indigenous religious beliefs, trauma response. So I'm gonna add something to what my grandmother said. The more you cry, the more at health you will be.
So what did you think of that video?
Honey, she read the whole Black community like a book. Okay? She definitely just put everything into perspective. I really enjoyed that. I'm definitely going to be looking her up, and hopefully she got some more videos on there.
Yes, yes. And I felt like it connected so much with what we were saying. You know, there is trauma in your traditions and illness. And, you know, what we're talking about is trying to heal, but that's not going to happen through just herbs and medicines. It's going to happen through healing that trauma as well. Amber?
I think that that was a message that a lot of people need to hear. And sometimes as Black people, we can get caught up in those, you know, thought processes because most of us are just trying to survive. But I appreciate the people that show up. Like when I was listening to this, the first thing I thought was, yes, I appreciate Janae because Janae is herself all the time. And I love that. I had to learn to stop code switching literally like 2 years ago. Like I just stopped code switching 2 years ago. And even like when it comes to traditions and things, trying to unlearn for ourselves and then show up in the unlearned version is very hard. And not everybody is afforded that privilege, you know, depending on our circumstances. So I just hope this for our people.
Mhm. Well, and I think about what that trauma has done to us, right? What that trauma, like, you know, illness wise and has done to our communities. And, you know, the reason why we are affected by so many more things is, I think, rooted in that trauma and also rooted in, you know, rooted in our inability to address that trauma. Sorry, someone knocked on my door, and of course, every dog in the house has to bark. So, all right. So, final thoughts on this book, and on using some of these remedies, and you know, what we can do to heal.
What was the question again, Tina?
How will you use this information? Was it useful to you? Do you think it has a place in your life?
Most definitely. You know, I know that quote that I had took a picture of when the sister was talking about listening and being in connection. I think that's something that's going to stick with me for a very long time. Um, so yeah, and just the remedies, you know, being able to pass those things on and putting things into perspective for some people, you know, just coming into it. Yeah, most definitely.
I really love the idea of using the medicine of the past to heal the trauma of the future. My grandparents and my dad, they grew up really poor. And they are all from abusive households. And so just this idea of using what worked in the past combined with what we know is healthy in the future and kind of developing this whole body holistic way of being is just absolutely wonderful. And I love that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I have the post test up. In a second, I will put the evaluation up. The evaluation is about the webinar in whole. And I would encourage you to come to our next book club, which will be the first week in February. Also, we have our perinatal webinar coming up on Wednesday. Janae and Kendra will be facilitating that for us. So I'm very excited to see that. And let me just put this evaluation up. Thank you for supporting and sharing tonight. And definitely go and get this book. It is really great, amazing. And once you have completed the webinar evaluation, you can go, and I will see you next month or on Wednesday for the perinatal webinar.
See y'all. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone. Tina, I'm trying my hand at making a croob.
Nice.
Yeah. So far, my attempts have been okay, but could have been better.
How was your MLK service?
It was okay. We showed up and they said, "Oh, you're gonna go organize donations in the community room." And then someone went to escort us up to the second floor and they said, "Oh, we already organized the donations yesterday." Yeah, so they put us in an office, 4 of us, and told us all to vacuum. So we
Oh,
all kind of walked around picking up little pieces of trash, helping each other vacuum.
oh my
for 2
God.
hours. And it was okay though. It was a good time to spend together, and it was the thought that counts, I guess.
Okay. So that didn't turn out quite as you expected, huh?
No, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I am sorry, but I am glad you got to spend time together, I guess. All right. I am going to stop this now. Have a great night. Bye.
Bye.